Hello, welcome, welcome. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to sign on, and yeah, we'll get started in just a few minutes. Hey, there's some familiar faces, familiar names in the attendee list. Fantastic. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. We will be using the Q&A function today. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and we'll do that through the whole webinar. Our numbers are steadily climbing. That's very exciting. We're going to take just another minute or two to get started. So if you wanted to stretch, fill up that coffee, anything you need to do, we'll get started in just a couple minutes here. All right, we've got 80 folks so far. That's excellent. We're going to wait just until it's 10:03, and then we'll get started. All right, it's 10:03. Let's do it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're really, really excited to be here for this webinar, Dual Enrollment for Foster Youth Towards Effective Practice. Let's go ahead to the next slide. This is what our agenda is for today. We're going to talk about why dual enrollment for foster youth. And we've got this amazing report that we're going to drop into the chat. You all will be the first public group to see it. And we have an amazing student profile as well. Then we're going to hear from our colleagues at Riverside City College and also the college district. We're going to get a student's perspective. And then we're going to talk about some of the promising practices and some recommendations. And then at the very end, we're going to have a legislative update for everybody, because there's exciting things happening there. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Thank you, Edith. So today we've got some great folks to listen to hear from. We've got Chris Deck, who is the project director for the Foster Youth Support Network with Riverside Community College District. We've got the amazing Jessica Bohannon, who is a dual enrollment coordinator and a student resource specialist at Riverside Community College. And then we have Iris Gomez, who is an awesome student at Riverside Community College. And when she was in high school, she had some dual enrollment courses. So she's going to tell us all about that. Next slide. Thank you. And then my dear colleague, Debbie Rauscher from John Burton Advocates for Youth, where she's the Director of Education. And myself, I'm Naomi Castro. I'm a Senior Director with the Career Ladders Project. Yeah, great question. We will make the slides available. We're going to send them out as a PDF to all the attendees. For folks who don't know CLP, Career Ladders Project, we promote equity-minded community college redesign. We collaborate with colleges and their partners to help to surface and disseminate effective practice. And we work in a broad range of areas. We do policy work, we do research, and we do direct capacity building with colleges and to enable systems change. We want to see more students attain certificates, degrees, and transfer, and of course, career advancement. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Debbie, to tell us about JBay.
Hello, yes, thank you. So we're very excited to have had the opportunity to partner with Career Ladders on this project. My organization, John Burton Advocates for Youth, our mission is to improve the quality of life for youth in California who have been in foster care or homeless. And we do that by focusing on advocating for better laws, as well as doing training and technical assistance, and conducting research to inform policy solutions. We work across 3 areas: housing, education, and health. And I am our Director of Education, overseeing all of our education-related work.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Next slide, please. So there are some fantastic dual enrollment practitioners on the webinar today, out of our 104 so far attendees. And they can probably attest to quite a lot of this. But we know dual enrollment works really well. Dual enrollment, students who participate in dual enrollment graduate high school at a higher rate. Students who participate in dual enrollment enter and complete college at a higher rate. And these are higher rates than students who don't participate in dual enrollment. And we've seen really especially strong outcomes for men, young men, for students of color, for low-income students, and for first-generation students. So the question then became, if we see dual enrollment as having all these really strong gains for students who are sometimes the students who are furthest from opportunity, would this hold true for foster youth? Foster youth have a lot of strong needs in the education system and have a fairly low rate of college degree attainment. And so how can we change that? How can we make that better for our students? I will be dropping some links. Oh, you know what? I have a technical question. I'm going to do an ask aloud. I'm used to dropping links in the chat, but we have disabled chat. And I don't think I can drop links in a question.
You know, I believe that you as a panelist can still chat to everyone.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I see that now. I was just complaining about, I have a small screen and my menu was hidden and it's there now. So thank you for that moment of vulnerability. So I will be dropping some links in the chat for us all. The first is curated resources for dual enrollment. And they have a lot of research in there, both national and California specific research. There's some really strong opinion pieces and op-eds in there and blog posts that really make the case for dual enrollment. And there's some fantastic tools for practitioners that are also in there. So I encourage folks to go to that link and check out the information. And then that kind of brings us to this project. So the question is, would dual enrollment be a successful strategy? Will it strengthen transition to college for foster youth as it does for other students? And so that was the question we went into this project with. And let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So for this project, we supported 3 sites over 16 months in basically exploring this question. What would it take for to enable foster youth to participate in dual enrollment? And you are the first public group to get this link right here in the chat to the project report. And at the end of these 16 months, there were 20 students who were foster youth who successfully completed dual enrollment. And we're just so pleased with that outcome. And along the way, now, of course, we had expected there would be more. And along the way, a few things happened, one of them being a pandemic. So this project was kind of conceived and begun in the first fall semester when we were still predominantly online, remote, and the beginning of the pandemic. And it's amazing to look back at that because, folks kept thinking, how much longer can this last? But it lasted quite a while. So the fact that 20 students successfully completed dual enrollment, I think is a testimony to the hard work people put in. There were 3 college sites that we worked with: Chabot College, who are in the Bay Area, Compton College, who's here in the greater Los Angeles area, and Riverside City College, who's on the edge of LA, but officially in the Inland Empire. And they did a lot of stuff. They really worked really hard, really focused in on this question of how to best support foster youth. And so we're going to hear from one of those colleges today. They're going to tell us what they did. But basically, all of the colleges used their funds for people time. I mean, this is really work that happens by people putting in the time to support and connect with young people. And so we had folks who were counselors who got additional hours for foster youth counseling. We had additional hours for dual enrollment student support specialists, additional hours for classified professionals to work with youth. And they really, really dug into how to do that, from recruitment to support to the very time-consuming process of actually enrolling students. And they learned a lot of lessons. And so the lessons are really outlined in the report, and as are the promising practices. And then we had the great pleasure to speak in depth to one of the students who took part in this project. So I'll put the student profile link when we're talking to our student. But before that, I'd like to pass it over to our colleagues from Riverside to tell us what they did.
Thank you so much, Naomi. Hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Chris Deck, and project director for our community college district's foster youth support network. You can go to the next slide, please. And so I just wanted to take some time briefly before we dive into the dual enrollment project that we started to sort of lay some context for our region's work to support foster youth, and how dual enrollment, we believe, is really an exciting and hopefully soon to be integral part of what we're doing in terms of college transition for foster youth. So our district back in 2018 received a grant from the governor's office to start this regional collaborative for foster youth success. We call it Foster Youth Support Network. So basically part of that initiative is to get together with all of the entities and organizations that serve foster youth in our community. That includes all the school districts and community-based organizations to really share best practices and work together to make sure that we're providing services to foster youth. But the second part of it, where the direct service really comes in, is we have dedicated staff members at each of our 3 colleges that serve their feeder high school foster youth population. You can go to the next slide, please. And so back to the sort of regional collaborative, like I mentioned, we do have several partners that are a part of this. Our district and the Riverside County Office of Education pretty much co-lead an advisory council that meets regularly. That includes our Department of Public Social Services, our local independent living program, all of the K through 12 districts and their foster youth representatives, local transitional housing programs, and community organizations. And so, like I said, we're really invested in trying to bring everyone together to be on the same page, as we all have a stake in these students' success. Next slide. And so for our direct transition support, because we're a 3-college district, we have one staff member at each of our colleges that is then embedded in their college's feeder high schools. Once again, like I mentioned, working exclusively with FOST youth in grades 9 through 12. And this is just a little chart showing sort of like how the structure, who is responsible for what area. So each of these staff members are resource specialists. And yeah, they're doing the work actually in the high schools, obviously pre-pandemic. COVID gave us a lot of challenges in terms of that, just like, you know, the whole state has experienced. But we transitioned fairly well to online support during, you know, the stay-at-home order and all of that. But we're excited that we're getting back to in-person support actually in the high schools as of now. Next slide, please. And so this is sort of a list of the type of support that's provided by these resource specialists back when we started in 2018 and up until now. So like I said, we're working with all grade levels in high school for FOST youth, responsible for trying to help them with college and career preparation, actually walking them through college applications, financial aid applications, making sure they follow through on all of the required financial aid process. FAFSA is just obviously the first point, and then they have to, you know, submit documentation to the college, just making that transition as smooth as possible and making sure the students are connected to the resources and the supports that will help them as they transition to post-secondary. And the biggest, you know, I guess the most important part is that for students that are coming to our colleges after high school, we serve as that bridge right to the campus foster youth support program or guardian scholars program. Next slide, please. And so regarding with the dual enrollment funding and pilot project, we were really excited to take part in the community of practice and really grateful to Naomi and Debbie and Compton College and Chabot to, you know, learn about this. You know, before we kind of started with this, our work consisted of sort of this linear direct line of like high school, then college. But we really dove in and wanted to make sure that we opened up opportunities for dual enrollment for FOST youth in sort of the Riverside feeder area. And so what we did with the funding was we dedicated a portion of our resource specialist time, the RCC resource specialist. That's Jessica, and you'll hear from her in just a bit to dive in more into the program. But her time was dedicated to identifying, you know, all of the FOST youth that she's sort of responsible for on her caseload and getting the word out about dual enrollment in those local high schools and onboarding them. So helping them, you know, with the actual onboarding process, and also collaborating on information sessions, providing, you know, orientations, information to caregivers in the schools, just to start advertising the opportunity. And then secondly, when we started, we also increased the hours for the RCC Guardian Scholars Activities Clerk. And then this person was responsible for once the foster youth enrolled into a dual enrollment class, they were responsible for checking with them frequently, making sure that they had access to college support, tutoring, ensuring that they were, you know, just doing okay. Once again, because we started this, you know, during COVID and during a lot of the stay at home. So making sure that she was just checking in and that the students were being successful in their classes. And then finally, we also set aside some funds to offer a stipend. So we wanted to provide just a little extra incentive for students to finish the courses. So if the students finished a dual enrollment course, they received a financial award. So once they passed the class successfully. Next slide, please.
Chris, can we take a pause right there? We've got some really good questions in the chat, which might make sense to answer before we move on. The first question, and I guess I should have covered this, I apologize, is what is dual enrollment?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, dual enrollment is the opportunity for a student in high school to enroll in a college course while they're still in high school. And they get college credit, and at least in our area and with our CCAP courses, those are the college courses taught at the high schools. They also get high school credit for it. So they get a jump start on their college career. dual enrollment.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Fantastic. And then Rio asked, she said, I'd love to hear about what outreach looks like in the K-12 and who at the K-12 site is being contacted and how well do students know your programming?
Oh,
So
perfect.
there's a whole bunch of questions, but they're all related.
Yeah, definitely. So, and you'll hear more too when Jessica kind of goes through her role and how she did this. But we have a dedicated resource specialist that's employed by the college, and they go out into the high school and they meet directly with foster youth in the high school. They make the connections with the high school counselors, with the foster youth representatives at the district level, and to ensure that we can actually, reach these students and let them know about this opportunity.
And the resource specialist position, that was a higher ed position, correct?
That's a higher ed position, correct?
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And the funding for the guardian clerk?
So that position is at the college. They are located in the Guardian Scholars Engagement Center. Not 100% sure how they were funded, to be honest, since I'm at the district office, but I believe it's a combination of student equity funds and probably private foundation as well.
Excellent, excellent. There's more questions in there, but I think we should go on and then we'll take another pause in a few minutes. Thank you, Chris.
Sure, yeah, anytime. That'd be great. And then sort of just the last slide I think that I have is once again related to outreach. We obviously have the in-person outreach from our resource specialists, but we've also tried to leverage what technology is currently available to us. And we have, number one, we're using a Power BI dashboard, which is updated daily, and it tracks all foster youth applicants to our colleges. So if they self-report on the application that they're a foster youth, they are fed into this report that all of our resource specialists have access to, and they can know which foster youth are coming into the college. Plus, when they apply that they are seeking dual enrollment, there's a special admit flag that's attached to their record. So we can not only see foster youth, but we can see foster youth that are still in high school that are trying to do dual enrollment. So that's one way, sort of a passive way, we are gathering students, potential students to participate. But we have a much more direct way as well. Like I mentioned, because we have this program with direct services to the high schools, we maintain our own database for the foster youth that we've identified in our local high schools. So we use a CRM, it's a communication tool, it's case management, and we also created sort of an automated marketing campaign within that system. So we sort of do drip emails and text messages directly to the foster youth in the high schools, letting them know about dual enrollment and encouraging them to connect with us to get started. Next slide, please. Okay, and so with that, that's sort of like the background on, how we've been supporting at the district level and supporting this project. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jessica so she can talk about the implementation of the dual enrollment with RCC.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, my name is Jessica Bohannon. I am the Student Resource Specialist for the Foster Youth Support Network based out of Riverside City College. And so like Chris mentioned, I do direct outreach at all of our local feeder high schools in our 3 districts. Right now, that's at about 14 different high schools. So throughout the course of any year, I touch base with probably around 200 to 250 students. And so because like Chris said, we already had that foundation, we've had our program up and running since 2018. It definitely made it easier, and it made a lot of sense to add dual enrollment as a tool that we use when engaging our students and increasing their chances at having success in high school and in college. And so basically our main approach was to try to fit into the existing college and career access pathways that were already set up at all of our feeder high schools. And so that's just an agreement that RCC already has with all of our schools on classes that will be offered, that already have been vetted, that the counselors know will count towards the high school requirements, and everybody knows like those classes are easy and set. And those are all specifically set aside to be taught by professors that know they're only teaching a class to high school students. Before COVID, of course, that professor would come onto campus and teach the class before or after school in a classroom, which was honestly a great opportunity for our students to learn how to interact with professors. But since COVID and everything has been at home at this time, all of those classes are offered online. And so, sorry, yeah, so basically using the existing framework, it's been easier to offer the students, hey, these are the 5 classes that are offered at your school. Can we find something that matches your interests? As far as outreach goes, as Chris mentioned, I'm already out in the high schools meeting with students in person. It looks a little bit different at each school site. Sometimes it's group meetings, sometimes it's one-on-one. But during those meetings that I'm already doing, I'm able to also discuss the benefits of the dual enrollment program and talk about the enrollment process and the next steps. We also, at 2 of my districts, I am able to access their SIS system. So I can actually log in and see their contact information, so I can make targeted phone calls or emails straight to the student to encourage them to participate in this program. I also, at each of my school sites, have a counselor that I'm pretty well connected to, so I'm able to share with them, that we're really trying to increase the numbers of our foster youth students that are taking these dual enrollment classes, so they can, push it out to students that may be interested, or they can recommend students who maybe would be a good fit for the program. And I've also been able to connect with our Thrive ILP program and do some presentations to their life skills classes to talk about dual enrollment and college opportunities and see if we can get any interest. Next slide, please. Awesome. So I think one of the biggest benefits of having me be able to spend more time with these students is walking them through the onboarding process. For a lot of our high school students, this can be kind of a tricky process. There are a lot of steps, but I'm able to sit with the student and help them do the RCC application, whether that's in person while I'm at their school, or if we set up a Zoom or a Google Meet for at a later time. I also can provide them with a copy of the CCAP approval forms. Luckily at RCC, those are lifetime approval forms. So if they get it signed and completed, then they can continue to enroll into the classes in following semesters. I also am able, in the 2 districts where I have SIS access, I can generate the student transcript and send that straight to dual enrollment. And then once the student is cleared, I'm able to help them log into my portal and access the registration program and help them all the way through the registration. And then, as issues come up, I feel like every student has their own challenge with this process. And so since I'm connected to RCC and the SIS, I kind of can be the go-between between dual enrollment and our program and the high school counselor and the student, trying to smooth out any wrinkles that show up and make sure that the student is able to successfully pass through this process and get into the class. Next slide, please. And so once we get through all of that and we have the student enrolled, I also am able to offer them continuing support throughout the semester. So I can check in with the student in person, by phone, email, or text, and just ask them if they're able to log into their account, if they're having any trouble with the work, if they need access to tutoring, if they need access to resources. I know in one of our previous semesters, we had a student that was struggling with Wi-Fi and internet connection. So we were able to kind of connect with the Riverside County Office of Ed and see what solutions we can offer that student. So like Chris mentioned, having that framework of all the different organizations already set up going into this dual enrollment program, it really helped us to target student needs and to find solutions. And then I also can just make sure they know how to log into the college system. If they need help, how to email the professor or what to say or how to log into their Outlook, I try to do all of that with the students as much as I can. I'm also really trying to build up group experiences with these students and make it seem more like a cohort, which is actually something that we're able to do more now with the online learning environment than we would have been able to before. I usually have maybe 1 or 2 students at each different high school location that are taking a class. But since I can get them all together on a Zoom or a Google Meet, we're really trying to leverage that technology to share financial literacy skills, study skills, and then I'm hoping to end the semester with a presentation about our CTE programs and really talk about career exploration to build the students' interest for the future. Next slide, please. And so we just wanted to talk over some of the outcomes since we started this program. The first semester that we really launched it was spring 2021, and we were able to get the 6 foster youth enrolled into classes, and 4 of them were able to complete. In fall, we had a lot of struggles that I think we're going to talk about a little bit later when we mention challenges, but we were able to get 2 students enrolled and they both completed successfully. And we are bouncing back for the spring. Right now we have 8 students enrolled, and I'm hoping to work closely with each student and have that be 8 complete successfully at the end of this semester as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is an opportunity for us to talk about challenges. Of course, COVID and remote learning have been a challenge for everybody in every high school and college situation across the board, but it definitely makes it more difficult to do the outreach. I know in spring and building up to the fall, I wasn't out at the high schools. I was trying to do all of the outreach over email, and our students receive so many emails from so many different programs that it's hard to kind of make that connection and spark that interest. A big challenge for us at RCC was in the fall, the students returned to in-person classes in all of our high schools. And the plan, I believe, was for the dual enrollment classes to be in person as well. And then kind of a last minute change coming from our district was to have a vaccine requirement for all of our RCC students taking in-person classes. And the way that translated was for all of the professors that were going to be teaching the dual enrollment classes to switch to online, because of course, we have no, way and no right to impose a vaccine mandate on a high school student. So it just made sense to pull that back to online. But that happened about 2 weeks before the semester started. And so some of the students that were really interested in taking an in-person college class at their high school, it didn't, turn out to be the best fit for them to switch to that online environment. But now that we know that it's an online environment, we're able to market it to our students, we're able to offer the appropriate resources, and we're able to kind of prepare them for that situation so we can find students that are interested in the way the program is now, or they know they want to hold back and see how it's going to look next year. Another struggle we had at RCC was the GPA requirement. So on our, official requirements, it does say that a student needs to have a 2.0 GPA. Which for our students can be a struggle. I know a lot of our foster youth students move schools very often in the middle of the term. They're not always able to bring their credits with them, or because of life circumstances, they're not always able to have that 2.0 GPA. But I've been really lucky in the work that I'm doing to always find a solution around that. So it's more of a GPA recommendation, but between talking with the counselors and working with the dual enrollment and admissions and records, we're always able to find a solution that best supports our students. So I know last semester I was trying to get a student enrolled and she had a really low GPA and her counselor didn't think it was going to be a good fit. They really wanted her to focus on catching up on credits that she missed during the stay-at-home order. And so she did. And then this spring she is enrolled in a dual enrollment class because her counselor and her believed that she was ready. I have another student that I was working with getting into this spring semester. And, last year, 9th grade, coming out of the pandemic, she had a 0.3 GPA. And so our admissions and records was like, do you think this is going to be a good fit? How can we best support this student? But in turning in her transcripts from fall 21, she had a 2.39 last semester. And so we can really tell that being in person and having the support, she's able to perform much better at school. And so she does seem to be ready for the dual enrollment coursework. And then of course, our last challenge is paperwork, because at RCC, we use a physical piece of paper that the student has to receive and then take home and get signed by their guardian, and then take to their counselor and get signed, and then email that over to dual enrollment. And so that's a lot of places for a piece of paper to get lost, but definitely, since I'm able to go back out to the schools in person, I can just pop in, hand them a new copy, or connect with their counselor, or if they, if I'm meeting with the student and they have everything filled out, I can take a picture and turn it into dual enrollment. So I try to ease that process as much as possible. Next slide. And so there has been a lot of positive outcomes from this dual enrollment project. For me, like I said, we started our program, the Foster Youth Support Network, in 2018, and I kind of had my set counselors at each school site that I connected with. But some of the high schools have a separate counselor that really handles all of the RCC or the dual enrollment students. And so I've been able to connect with new counselors and strengthen my connection at some of the high schools. I've also really been able to connect with the college and career counselors and the college and career centers on the campuses of the high schools. And so it's great for me to see what resources are out there that are already established to support our high school students. We also have a great partnership with our RCC Associate Dean of Educational Partnerships. I believe she came onto the scene sometime over last summer. So, we were able to kind of get through that first spring of dual enrollment and figure things out as we were going. And then over the summer, we really were able to connect with Dr. Grayson. And so she's awesome. She sends me flyers that I can use when I'm promoting this to the students. She's always there to answer technical questions. If a class gets full, she's able to work with the high school counselors if there's a lot of interest and add another course for these students to take. So it's been great to see all of that come together. And then of course, the biggest positive for me is seeing our students actually succeed. So we have one high school in our district that has what they call an annex. And so they offer way more dual enrollment classes than any of our other traditional high schools. And one of my students there, she's a senior right now. She has already completed 23 high school credits. And with the classes she's enrolled in right now, she's on track to graduate with 30 complete high school credits, which is half of an associate's degree, which is an amazing start for her. She already was on this path. She already has been doing great at school, but we're able to step in and offer additional support. And of course, the stipends for every class she completes. So it's great to see her succeed. And then of course, our second student success I want to share about is Iris. She is our peer mentor now in our Guardian Scholars program. So it was great, I think, for her to kind of get introduced to all of us and get introduced to our program and kind of start building that confidence while she was still in high school, so that by the time she got to the college, she was already connected. She's our first student we've ever had that was really ready to come in her first semester and be a peer mentor. So she's figuring things out for herself, but already has that confidence and that drive to help other students figure things out as well. So it was great just to kind of see her go through the whole process and then come in and be such a great help. We're taking her to conferences. She's doing amazing things. So I think that's everything I had to talk about. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so we have a million questions. So we're going to get through some of these questions and then we're going to move on to hear from Iris. One of the questions was, has COVID restrictions affected foster youth differently than other students? And if so, how is that being handled? And Chris or Jessica, you can chime in. Debbie, if you want to chime in as well.
I mean, I think honestly, Iris could provide a good perception of this, but I know across the board, right, students are spending, during the lockdown, students were spending a lot of time at home. And for some of our foster youth students, they were in a group home and they had 6 kids that were all trying to get on the Wi-Fi and be engaged in classes, and everybody has their speakers on, and the Wi-Fi can't handle it. There's not enough quiet spaces. And so some of those things I think were not considered by the school or by the teachers during this time. And so a lot of students, fell behind, or even if they weren't in group homes, maybe their foster home wasn't the most supportive. They didn't have the help at home. It's hard to say, what really happened when everyone was on the stay-at-home orders. But I do see a lot of students that have returned, looking back at their grades. A lot of our students now are in credit recovery, or maybe they don't have the best GPA just because, I was a parent during the stay-at-home order, and trying to support my kindergartner through virtual learning was impossible. So I can't imagine, how hard it would have been to support a teenager at that time.
Great. And when we move to Iris, that'll be our first question. So thank you for that. There's some very specific ones too. Like, so how did you get access to the SIS system with the high school?
Yeah, so we were able to sign data sharing agreements between our college and some of our our feeder high school districts. And that's how we were able to get access.
Excellent, excellent. And do you have some suggestions for class selection? Kyle wrote, the counseling study skills classes versus more typical subjects that may, double count more effectively.
I honestly just try to have the student choose whatever they think they'll be most interested in. In my experience, if a student has a high interest, they're going to be more dedicated to trying to take the class. If they're just trying to get their feet wet, they don't really know where to start, I always try to suggest a guidance class because usually those are more supportive and there's less like take home work or memorization they have to do. But a lot of students, as soon as they see that psychology class or that sociology class, they're drawn right to it because they're so interested in those classes. So it really just is case by case, whatever the student is drawn to.
Thank you. Thank you. And then there's a couple of questions that kind of talk about, isn't this a lot? Like, and I think Iris's profile will speak to this as well. But Trin asked, some students feel overwhelmed by the idea of taking high school and college at the same time. What were some of the challenges you noticed that foster youth experienced during this? I think you spoke to some of them, but like, isn't this too much?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. But, like I mentioned, I come across maybe 200 to 250 students in a year. And I think, we had 8 students in dual enrollment. So it is really about finding the students that are ready for it, are passionate about it, are focused on school. So, it's meeting with the students, seeing what they're interested in, and just giving them the opportunity to show that maybe they are ready. But it is hard to find students that are not in credit recovery and are interested in it and don't already have a job. So they have free time, but they haven't pushed themselves into too many AP classes. And so it is kind of, meeting with students and talking to them about their interests, but it's not too hard for everybody. There are students that are driven, that are interested, that are capable. And so even if I'm able to find 2 or 3 of them each semester, that's 2 or 3 students that are getting the opportunity to get a head start on college. And to me, that's worth it.
Fantastic. And then Tammy has a really nice question here. How have you found, when meeting with foster youth that they might be behind on high school credits because foster youth move schools more than a non-foster youth? Are the counselors supportive, informative? And she has some legal citations there. Have you found that they're not on track with A to G prior to dual enrollment? And also threw in a compliment, what you're doing is amazing and so much needed. So a lot of questions in there, but are students generally, are they behind? Are they in credit recovery? Are the counselors supportive?
Thank you, first of all, for the compliment. So there are some students that are behind that are in credit recovery, and when given the opportunity to take dual enrollment, a lot of them will say, no, I just want to catch up on my credits. I'm not interested right now. And so I haven't really, had to go to bat for a student that is behind on credits and really wants to take dual enrollment. So I can't say how that conversation would go with the counselor. As far as the counselors being supportive, honestly, for me, it varies by school. Some schools I work directly with the College and Career Center, and they're really excited about getting our foster youth students involved because they already have a strong dual enrollment program there. Some schools, there's so many counselors and so many students and so much paperwork going on that they'll sign the paper, but I don't know if they're supportive or not supportive. It's kind of me and the student trying to work through it together. So it definitely just varies case by case.
Fantastic. And just one more question before we move to Iris. And if we aren't able to answer all of these, we'll definitely send follow-ups. We're going to send the recording out, the slide deck, and all kinds of resources. But Tammy asks, does the Foster Youth Support Network assist in all transitional living when students need assistance where they will live after aging out of group homes?
I just wanted to say that transitional housing programs are a part of, our sort of regional collaborative. And so at a high level, we're always discussing with the program coordinators of those programs, what openings are available in certain transitional housing programs, but also the resource specialists make direct referrals when they can for housing if a student needs that as well.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. And so with that, let's go ahead and actually there you can stop sharing the slides. And we're going to talk to Iris. Iris is a real actual student. Hooray. And we do have a profile that we wrote up of Iris. And I'm going to drop that link in the chat. But Iris, just tell us a little bit about your experience. You're a regular first semester, or actually second semester now, college student. But you took some classes while you were in high school. Just tell us about it.
Yeah, so I actually took 2 courses. The first, I was a junior when I took my first one, which was like a guidance course. And then the second was interpersonal communication. So I did take both of those. They were really beneficial, I think, for myself, just because, like Jessica had mentioned, they let me choose what I wanted to do. So I really was appreciative of that, just because, I did take it at a different place. So the guidance course was at Chaffey College. So I did take it there just because I was in that area, but like someone had said, we move a lot. So but when I did take the guidance course, it was a little bit before I had got into the system. So it's a little bit of a different perspective for me, just because I was in person in that one and it was a little bit more active, but I never understood the challenges I was going to face when I did take the other course, just because of like personal issues, or my environment, because I was in the group home when I did take that course, and like how Jessica said, there's kids everywhere, and the Wi-Fi is crazy. So overall, my experience was really well. I really did like the course. It was a little bit of a challenge, just because going through a lot. It is a lot mentally to do it, but I mean, I felt ready enough to go ahead and do that. The interpersonal communication was really cool because I majored in psych. So it was really something I was interested in, because it was a lot about like your personal self and talking, communication. So I found that really helpful for myself. But yeah, there was a lot of things that were helpful. Actually, it helped me transition into college, just because I am a first generation college student. And I'm like the third in my family to graduate from high school. So it was really scary to go into college. I was really nervous, and I really wanted that little step to see how it works. I didn't really expect to see myself before in the place I am, which is I'm so grateful for. But honestly, without getting my feet wet and understanding how college courses work, it really did help me. It gave me a lot of insight and helped me to learn how to better prepare myself, just because being in the system, I feel like a lot of us want to know what we're getting ourselves into and want to understand that, is this okay for us to do? Is this like good enough for us to do? And it definitely was very beneficial. I think without taking those courses, it helped me with confidence. It helped me boost, my determination to finish, just because there was points and times where I was like, well, is this worth it? Is it worth my time and effort? And at first, the stipend is nice to have that, but at the end of the day, it's more so personal. I was able to feel so accomplished when I finished that class, just because it helped me to give myself that like wow moment of, I actually did it. I actually did something that my family hasn't done. I'm moving into something else, which is what would I like educators to know. Transitioning into that, I think the main one is just support and reassurance, just because I had a lot of questions with myself. Was I going to be able to do it? Was it going to be hard? Because it was high school courses and college courses. So of course I was a little nervous of that. Like someone had said in the questions, they were like, is that a lot? Honestly, it's just how you're able to handle yourself and understand if you have your time. Time management is very important too. I was learning, of course, the courses were like designed to be college courses, but they were very supportive. They were very open to communications. I mean, it was a communication class, but the professor, he was really supportive. He understood that the students were, some foster youth. And so he really did want to give everybody the same opportunity and treat us like if we were, like not necessarily normal, because I don't like to say that word in that context, but treat us more like if it's, we can do it. And he didn't give us that doubt. So that's the main thing I think a lot of educators should know, is just because, yeah, we go through, we have our own personal issues. We have our own personal lives we have to deal with. And that is a lot on its own, especially with doing high school. A lot of students don't even want to complete school. And so it's a little bit of a challenge, but like I said, I think it's more so that reassurance, because honestly, after meeting like some of the RCC staff, they gave me a lot more affirmation that I could do it compared to Chaffey College, because I was, like I said, I wasn't in foster care at that time. But when I was, they really did reassure me. At first, I wasn't 100% sure. I was like, is this too much? I already did a class before and I understood how it worked. But they really did help, and they reassured me to take that step. And I feel like that's what a lot of us need, is just a little push to go forward, because sometimes you never know, especially like me, I was really just my own mentor. And there I kind of felt like I had guidance and support, So I didn't really feel like I needed to build that wall up and seem strong all the time, because I was that person who was strong and didn't really have, I was able to handle everything, which sucks at times, but sometimes it's good to be able to lean back and just have that help, because a lot of us, well, for me personally, it is a little hard to ask for help, but it's not that it's hard, it's just for what we're used to. And anyway, but moving on, it was really supportive, and that's all I can really say is just to reassure us that what we're doing is good, because it is a personal choice, of course, but it's a little bit of like, I really did it because I wanted to prove myself and to prove others that I could do it. And that's what I also would like to tell the foster youth too, thinking about doing dual enrollment, is that the main reason I was so confident in going forward and doing it was because a lot of the time we never have control of our lives. Well, per se, like we don't have a lot of control. Like I was moved a lot. I went to different places without even knowing where I was going to go sometimes. So it's like I took control by going to school, doing my education. Because if I could control something, I could control my education. And why would I not want to do that? It's like it's harder said than done, of course. But it feels good to just be like accomplished and to feel like an adult. I was already feeling like, college was for me because I was so proud of myself for completing it. I could not wait to go and actually set foot and actually do that. And with all of the resources and all the people I met, it wasn't even just going to the courses and getting credit. It was networking myself too, because after that, I met Chris, and then I met Jessica, and then I met Jeremy, who is he's like the foster youth for the Guardian Scholars. I worked there and peer mentor with him, and Jessica, I work with her. So it's really nice, just because it's not only that, you get to make like connections with people that I never would have made if I never took that step. And that I used to think of it as a risk, but it's not a risk anymore. It was never a risk. It was actually something really beneficial for myself. And so that's what I would say. I would say that at the end of the day, foster youth, we've had a lot taken from us. We've had a lot of like things done, said, whatnot. But I mean, school, if you could take control over something, at least let it be something that's positive. Now I can actually envision the future for myself, because when I started, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. But then I realized going into college, there's so much support that I never knew there was, that I got more than I received, like in general. It was a lot of overwhelming, eye-opening things that I never knew would take place until I actually took that step forward and decided to put myself out there to actually try. And it's better to try than to not. And if it doesn't work out, you never know. You never know the outcome. And just that's my main thing. Take control back is my main thing. Take control of what your life, your pathway, because it'll all work out in the end. Trust me. I'm moving into my own apartment now. Everything's cool. I'm like she's my second semester of college, and everything's working out really well. And I was living in a bubble where I thought foster youth was everything for me, that I was going to be a foster youth forever, but it's not. And being in college gave me a little bit of that like separation of, okay, well, there's school and there's foster youth. So, I got to live in a world, not necessarily live in a world. I lived in a world where I was just completely blindsided by foster youth. But then when I went into college, it made me realize that I actually have an adult life out. I can actually go out and do what I need to do. But yeah, that was a lot, but that's what I'd say. It's a lot to say. It's just, there's so much I love about dual enrollment. It gave me so many opportunities. So I really do recommend doing courses. I really do. I think it helped me so much. And I would give this advice to anybody,
All right. All right. Iris, thank you so much. Check out the Q&A, because it is full of compliments for you, and everybody at Riverside and this big support network that you have. And now you've got like 124 folks that are also on Team Iris. So right on. That's so great. Fantastic. But Iris, don't go anywhere. There might be some more questions for you.
No, of course.
Also, folks, feel free for my other panelists, if you wanted to go in and answer any of those questions, you are welcome to do that now in the Q&A. We're going to keep showing the slides there. If we can jump back into the slides. We've got a couple of other things we want to leave you with before we're done here. So again, that student profile, Iris's write-up, is in the chat. You can check that out, and we'll also send it to everybody. But this pilot was 3 colleges, and collectively they learned a lot of things, right? And the report has the details. But some of the promising practices that they really uncovered, and you heard it just from Iris, right, is staffing, adequate staffing and trained, like folks need to be trained, right? And so our colleagues at Riverside, a lot of them had really unique training before they came to these positions, already working with foster youth or working in counseling and support services. Iris herself is a trained staff member, and she also brings to her position a lived experience to help her connect with other foster youth. Support for the students. So there were a lot of questions in the chat about the stipends in particular. That's some solid support there. At Riverside, they used grant funds for those stipends because there was questions about how did they do that. Compton College also offered stipends for dual enrollment students, all dual enrollment students, and that was through a private gift to the college. And then, have that support be asset-based, right? Like, you've got some awesome things going on as a student, you are capable, you are fantastic, and we're going to support you in that, as opposed to kind of deficit-minded support, like, just kind of everything we've just heard in this whole webinar. And then institutional practices, there's a lot of working across departments. And we heard Chris and Jessica talk about that. They do foster youth support. They had to reach out to their dual enrollment department, which they traditionally don't, work together that much on college campuses. They're kind of like their own separate worlds, doing their good work, but reaching out and really working across the campus is really helpful. And then, of course, identifying and removing those barriers. So we talked about the GPA perception, right? And I put a link in the chat too for colleges who want to move away from that historical practice of using a GPA for dual enrollment. It's actually not allowed in Title V, except for placement in math and English. So you need some citations that they're in there in the chat for you. And then, of course, cross-institutional relationships. So the college folks working really closely with their high school counterparts, the support folks for foster youth at the high school, the counselors, instructors, all of that, just kind of building the strong network to help students succeed. And there's a lot more detail in the report. I'll drop that in a minute. But I'm going to hand it over. We're going to advance the slides. I'm going to hand it over to Debbie to talk about the policy recommendations.
Yes, hello, thank you. So I'm going to start with what are some recommendations for colleges and high schools in terms of their internal policies. The first is to have dual enrollment be built in, not added on. So what that means is, there are some campuses where in order to take a dual enrollment class, it is done outside of regular school hours and you don't get high school credit for it. Whereas there's other campuses where the programs are offered during the high school day and they're offered as dual credit. So they count towards high school graduation requirements as well as college credit. So we really encourage institutions to think about how they can embed their dual enrollment courses during the high school day and for dual credit, because it just removes a barrier. It makes it that much easier for students to access dual enrollment. And for a population like foster youth, these are students who are going to have the greatest barriers already to accessing dual enrollment. And so removing barriers like making them take it outside the regular high school day is one of our recommendations. The second is training for instructors, counselors, and support staffs. Understanding the unique needs of foster youth is really essential. Even if there's just a couple of these students in the program, it's really important for everybody to understand more about how to respond to these students in a trauma-informed way. And there's definitely resources in every community, programs that can come in and help to provide that kind of training. And then the third recommendation is already been touched upon, which is to remove barriers, in particular, things like high school GPA requirements, which, as Naomi noted, is in fact not allowed under law. And please do look at the link in the chat to get more information about that. Definitely want to make sure that those kinds of barriers aren't put in place. At the state level, one of our recommendations is to clarify the excused withdrawal policy that exists under Title V regulations. And so right now, there's some examples that are given in terms of what would qualify as an excused withdrawal, but additional clarification or guidance from the California Community Chancellor's Office would be helpful, because we know that foster youth are more likely to have to move or experience housing insecurity, or maybe lose access to the necessary technology or Wi-Fi access. And we want to make sure that those types of circumstances count as an excused withdrawal, so that if a foster youth does need to drop a dual enrollment class, it doesn't then go on to impact their ability to receive financial aid in the future. So more clarity about that would be helpful. The second is allowing county offices of education to access CCAP partnerships. And there actually is a bill that I'll talk about in a minute that would help do that. But right now, programs like alternative schools and court schools that are operated by county offices of education can't operate CCAP partnerships. And so we'd like to see that change. And then offer wide latitude in determining satisfactory academic progress. So a recent presentation from the Department of Education indicated that colleges can exclude dual enrollment courses when calculating GPA. They can essentially treat high school students like transfer students. And SAP policies do allow institutions to exclude transfer credits, including those from dual enrollment. And so there was a question I saw in the Q&A about this, what happens if a student fails their class, and making sure that that doesn't impact their ability to receive financial aid in the future. And that is something that institutions do have some latitude around. And then the next slide. I know we're at time, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but I will say I just want to highlight that we at JBay are doing a budget request for foster youth support programs across all 3 systems, and a bill. And I think that Naomi is going to put that link in the chat right now. So we're looking for letters of support as well as sign-ons to our budget letter. We really, really do need support for this effort to make sure foster youth have all the support that they need, regardless of what path they take through college or university. So please do jump onto that link and download a support letter, and you can send it to us and sign on to our budget support letters as well. And we'll send out these slides. I'm not going to talk about the rest because I know we're already at time.
We could go on and on and on. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so very much. I know there were questions we didn't get to. We'll try and send out a follow-up. But thank you, everyone. Thank you to our colleagues on the phone. Iris, you got to send out big invitations when it's time to graduate, because like all the people on this webinar want to come to your graduation. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll send out some follow-up emails. Cheers.